Hey, it's Rich. Welcome back to Diary of a Music Maker. In today's episode, I wanted to discuss the idea of something I call vibes over tracks. My name is Rich. I'm a professional music maker and composer, and I've been doing it for over a decade. And this is me sharing my process, my thoughts, and everything in between with you, the music maker. Okay. A little backstory to today's episode. Professionally, I started out in advertising. I wanted to get into film scoring, but I stumbled into advertising. And what that looked like for me was I was a bespoke composer on a roster of composers for a music publisher who had a music sync team. The sync team would get briefs in the morning, and they would email me saying, "Do you have anything like this?" So, I don't know, jazzy acoustic nylon string guitar. And I'd say, "Sure. When do you need it by?" And they'd say, "Oh, we need it in 2 hours." And I would say, "Okay, great. And how long do you need it to be?" And they would say, about 60 seconds. Pretty much everything in advertising is 30, 60 or 90 seconds. So the longest piece of music I would ever write for these adverts was 90 seconds. And then I would write that music and send it over. So in that time slot, that 2-hour time slot, I would produce a very short piece of music. The aim with a lot of this music was to capture the vibe. You know, with advertising, if they're not going for something that people already know, like a Queen song, they're going for a feeling, a vibe. So for years, I was producing minute-long tracks to a vibe, and I loved it. I still love it. And that kind of sort of, you know, when I was doing this, people would say, "Dude, why are all your songs so short?" Like, you know, and it flies against everything I learned as a songwriter, which is, you know, the perfect 3-minute song structure. Everything, it's got to be 3 minutes. If it's less than 3 minutes, whoa, Nelly, you're pushing the bar out too far. That's the kind of vibe, you know. With songwriting, it was like, go for 3 minutes. With this advertising stuff, it was like, who cares? As long as it fits the ad and fits the vibe, boom, 60 seconds, boom, 30 seconds. And I loved it. It enabled me just to produce music the way I wanted it, which was just get the ideas out and just let them into the world. Sorry, I keep having to adjust the light. I've got these shutters and the sun is shining brightly, and then the sun goes behind a cloud and it gets very dark. I'll leave it like this. Back to my point. So there I was producing these 60-second vibes. That slowly diminished as I moved into trailing music, where admittedly the songs are pieces of music, I should say. The pieces of music are still about 2 to 3 minutes. So rarely would I ever go over 2.5 minutes. So I'm still writing what you would call short pieces of music. And I loved it. It was great. But it never felt like this kind of short music for media, music for sync, that kind of format never really fitted outside of sync. And then this thing called streaming and playlisting came along, right? And all of a sudden, I find myself listening to playlists of a vibe. You know, like calm beats to have a nap to. That's the feeling. That's the vibe, right? And all of the songs on this, all the pieces of music are all between 1 and 2 minutes long. And I go, wait, I have permission to do this outside of the professional zone. And this whole thing about, no one really talks about this. Well, some people are talking about it in a bad way. Like, isn't it wonderful that we can release short pieces of music to a vibe? We don't have to obsess over the structure. We don't have to obsess over the details. If we capture the feeling, which in itself is an incredible skill, if we capture the feeling above all else, then you're winning. So what I've been doing recently is I have been embracing this vibe over tracks. So I'm not producing 2 to 3 minute track, I'm producing a vibe. And if that vibe is a minute long, great. If it's 4 minutes long, great. If it's 30 seconds, great. No matter what, as long as I capture the vibe with the finished product, I am happy and I let that into the world. And it has been incredibly freeing. And I see some incredibly successful artists doing this exact same thing. It'll be a single, 40 seconds long. You listen to it and you go, bloody genius. And it has been incredibly freeing. This idea of just focusing on the mood. And this is what we do as library composers as well, as production music composers. We go for a vibe. Can you sustain a vibe? Emergency ambulance vibe. Dark, sinister crime scene vibe. We are going for vibes as production music composers, and now that whole world is moving and has moved into streaming, where people are focusing on vibes over this idea of complete tracks. And I say complete because actually a piece of music is complete when you deem it complete. Some people will have their own opinion about that, but they will always have their own opinion about it. So I'm thinking of a vibe where it captures the feeling over and above sticking to a set structure. So what I mean by that is, say, let's for instance choose the epic music genre. I wouldn't necessarily stick to a specific song form. It could just capture the feeling of epic fantasy, and it could just be a build. It could just be a simple melody over a choir or something like that. It doesn't have to be this set structure, this set form. It can be whatever you want. The new structure is the emotion and the vibe, which is what I've been doing for years in sync and in production music. And now, which makes me very happy, we can now start to approach this to streaming and to platforms like Spotify, where we can just have an artist that produces a vibe. And then this goes back to me as a listener. When I'm listening to an artist and I love them for a certain feeling or a certain vibe, and when they deviate from that vibe, I go, skip. It's not that it isn't good what they've done, it's that I'm here for a reason. Because it's my listening habits have changed. It's not like I would sit down and listen to an album and sort of flick through the book of the CD. I will put on an album to have a vibe given to me. So I'll go to this one artist for chill lo-fi beats. The moment it gets too jazzy, I'm like, I don't want this. Skip. And it's the same with ambient artists. A lot of ambient artists also do dark wave music, which I love. But if I'm there for the ambient stuff and all of a sudden I get this dark wave track, I might be like, skip. I'm not saying that I'm not a true fan, but I don't think we have true fans like that in the same way. I certainly am. The only true fan I am of artists these days are ones that I have, I would call them legacy artists from back in the day. I absolutely love certain artists for the vibes they produce, and I love it when artists stick to that vibe. And that is what I am trying to do. I'm trying to have artists that stick to certain vibes, and that is it. So that you know what you're going to get. You buy some ketchup because you want ketchup. You don't buy ketchup because you want them to surprise you with mayonnaise. And that's the kind of feeling I get with music. I'm buying into this band, this artist, for the vibe, not for the surprise, not for anything else. And I don't want you to assume that I'm not interested in them as an artist or as a songwriter. I am. But I'm approaching my writing like I approach my listening. I still listen to certain artists and they can do whatever they want, and I still listen to them and go, yeah. Actually, Weezer is a good example. Weezer have churned out Weezer tracks consistently for decades, and I absolutely love them. They release a new album, I listen to it and you go, nothing really much has changed, but that's why I love it. I'm there for Weezer. I'm not there for anything else. So think about that when you're producing your music. What are your fans there for? They're there for a certain feeling. You can do different variations of your style, but as long as the feeling is the same, that is where it matters most. Don't make me think that, don't assume that I'm saying you should always use a classical guitar in your lo-fi track. You can use whatever instrument as long as the feeling is the same. So vibes over tracks.